Either way, we've got a video about cheese. Where did cheese really come from? I really like cheese, so I'm pretty stoked to learn a little bit more. I mean, I've watched a lot of videos on cheese, but why not learn more, right? So let's check it out.
Cheese. You know it, you love it. In
Yeah.
Western culture, it comes
Yeah.
in just about every shape, size, and state of being.
Yeah.
And we eat it with just about everything.
Everything.
Some of you may be eating cheese at this moment. We see you, Mary. But what do we really know about cheese? And where did it come from? And who made it? Well, get ready, because we're going all the way back. From its simple
knows,
beginnings
Lance?
to what it has become today. Weird History is going to be talking about the story of cheese.
Oh, that steak looked good. Meat. Just big slabs of meat. Ugh.
Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what your favorite cheese is. Now,
What is your favorite cheese, guys? Oh God, what is my favorite cheese? Maybe bocconcini? I really, really love bocconcini. I think it might be bocconcini. But I also really love brie. And I mean, mozzarella is also just like, it's good with everything. Tillamook cheddar. Wensleydale? Not that I don't know what Wensleydale cheese is. I don't know, man. Bocconcini is just something special to me. I can have it with everything. I can have it on sandwiches. I can have it in salads. I could just sit there and eat it. I can have it on crackers. You can melt it on pizza and it's fucking bomb. It's cheese made from water buffalo milk. It is so good. Oh, and they come in like these little balls. I love it. It's really, really, really soft, watery cheese. Oh, man. Crumbly cheese. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Parmesan, too. Oh, God. I just love cheese. It's so good. Kraft singles? Shell. Get out of here. Oh.
sit back with a charcuterie board and some wine. We're about to cheese it up.
I already do that, Hero. I've got a channel entirely dedicated to it.
The moon is made of green cheese. Proverbs of John Haywood.
The history of cheese is wrapped in as much legend and lore as a packet of Kraft singles is wrapped in plastic. Cheese's origin story is somewhat murky, and it can be difficult to differentiate between myth and fact. At one point in history, some people may have actually believed the moon was made of cheese. Well, in this case, they're
hope
right.
not.
This lunar surface is actually Wabash Cannonball, an ashed-rind goat cheese that is from Indiana.
Fair point.
Kind of like the moon, but with more corn and Larry Birds. But before we talk about cheese, let's first start with milk. After all, we wouldn't have great fromage without some moo-moo juice. Milk has been intertwined with culture and religion for thousands of years. Let's go back to the heavens, where the Greeks originated the word galaxy from the word gala, meaning milk. Greek mythology says that the Milky Way was formed when Hera, wife of Zeus and goddess of womanhood, spilled her breast milk while feeding her son Heracles. Each one of her little droplets of milk equals one star in the night sky. Looking
that's
out into
nasty.
the vastness of the universe, one cannot help but think, wow, that is a shit ton of milk. How big was that kid? Was it a squirt or was it a, oh shoot, I wasn't paying attention and left the faucet running situation. The universe's mysteries.
All right, not to be too gross. You can close your ears if you don't want to hear this. But I remember a long time ago, when my aunt was breastfeeding, and one of her jokes was like from the other side of the room. She would fucking get you with it. It was awful. But she thought it was the funniest fucking thing. May she rest in peace, that gloriously silly woman. Jesus Christ.
Hindus also have a milk universe origin story, in that the creation of the stars and galaxy was done by Vishnu, who did so by churning a massive sea of milk. Needs more salt. Even throughout Christianity, the Virgin Mary is often depicted showing her breast, lactating. Turning to science, milk is what makes a mammal a mammal. The term mammal in Latin means of the breast, and is part of mammalia, which is the ability to produce milk. But when did we start drinking milk other than our own?
That's okay,
Who
Lance.
discovered
You
we
could
could
just
get
watch the
milk
channel.
from cows? And what did he think he was doing at the time? Billy Connolly.
The rise of
you
farming
know
and
what?
agriculture.
You know what? That's actually not a fair point, because I've seen the weird shit that people do. If anything, I am nowhere near shocked that people decided to get milk from cows. People are fucking weird. People are fucking weird. Why are you sorry, Hero?
As well as the domestication of animals such as sheep and goats, led man into his first foray into drinking milk.
Oh, I don't
Evidence
like
points
that
to the time
scene.
near
That
9,000
Who made that stock footage? That was not okay. That is not okay. Oh my god, that's worse than the breast milk squirting paintings.
BC that the first people to milk animals were the Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, who lived in southern Mesopotamia, which today would be the region of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Sheep and goats were first used for milk for a number of reasons. Along with their generally nicer disposition, those animals were used to living in smaller spaces, such as caves, making it easier to corral
And
them
they can eat
in a
anything.
confined space. Cows would eventually get gated around 7000 BC in the region of what is now Turkey. Domesticated animals were first used as wet nurses, where babies would drink milk from the animal itself. The act of tapping an animal's nip has taken place throughout history, both real and fabled. The founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, are depicted feeding off a mother wolf that raised the twin brothers. But how are babies able to drink milk, let alone other animals? After all, aren't we all lactose intolerant? We know someone who is. Look at him, watching this video, shivering. There was a
Loser.
point when adults started drinking milk, and around 5500 BC, adults developed lactose persistence, or kept the lactase enzyme in their gut, which allowed them to drink and digest milk. Babies can drink milk without all the stomach mumbo-jumbo because of rennet. Rennet is an enzyme found in the stomach of mammals that curdles
Yeah.
the casein in milk and converts lactose into lactose.
Okay, that I don't know how we figured that out. I don't know how we figured out the rennet thing, because yeah, I've seen a lot of videos on how to make cheese, and there are some other things that you can use besides rennet, but like that's a lot of the stuff that humans have figured out over the years is excuse me, is pretty mind-boggling.
Lactic acid. Generally, that enzyme goes away after weaning off your mother. We'll see in a moment why rennet is important to cheese.
I know, right, Sean? I might blur
And
out
what's
some
cheese?
things. Maybe. I don't know.
Corpse of Milk. James Joyce.
Corpse
Ulysses.
of milk? I mean,
In Greek
yeah.
mythology, the son of Apollo, Aristeus, who was the god of shepherds and beekeeping, was also the god who invented cheese. If you're giving a god credit for bringing it into the world, surely cheese was pretty important to the Greeks. But in reality, cheese was probably around a few thousand years before the Greek gods were created. The ongoing myth of the origins of cheese
Just have
is that
some
years
blur
ago,
pop-ups
some
on, like, a
random
button.
dude, presumably in the Middle East,
I don't think-
transported milk in a pouch made from an animal stomach.
I don't think
and
this will be too
inadvertently
bad.
discovered when going for a drink of some milk, he got clumps of curd. Let's quickly see how cheese is actually made. Basically, making cheese is taking warmed milk, adding a starter culture, and rennet. The lactic acid coagulates the milk, and the rennet separates the curd from the whey.
Oh,
Traditional
cheese.
rennet is from the stomach of a calf. Early cheese was probably a simplified version of this process. There's evidence of cheese making occurring around 8000 BC in Mesopotamia by Neolithic farmers. Concurrently, the Neolithic era was coming into its own, which brought with it the development of pottery and ceramics. which helped bring cheese into reality. Ceramics and pottery helped with not only food storage and transport, but early versions of strainers or sieves emerged. With the warm Middle Eastern climate, as well as naturally occurring regional bacteria, milk would quickly spoil, ferment, and coagulate. These curds would be the earliest foundation and a version of the cheese that we all know and love today. After seeing this happen, it was only a matter of time before people started trying these clumps of curd and realizing this was more digestible than milk. With this ability to preserve, dairy was able to spread around the region more rapidly. This gave people from the region an advantage when it came to their survival. A few thousand years later is when we see evidence of more and more cheese popping up around the Middle East and Europe.
Cheese is milk's leap towards immortality. Clifton Fadiman.
Around 5,000 years ago, ancient Egypt was believed to have been making cheese. Using reeds, Egyptians made an early version of cottage cheese, made from goat's milk. Egyptian pharaohs were buried with cheese in the urns, giving them a tasty treat for the afterlife. I hope they brought enough for everyone. In 2010, at a burial site near Cairo at the Saqqara necropolis, archaeologists discovered a solidified whitish mass in jars that belonged to a high-ranking Egyptian official. This whitish mass ended up being the oldest cheeses ever discovered. We all love well-aged cheese, but avoiding this particular hunk is strongly recommended. Coming back to Greece, or Greece 2, the Greeks created an early version of the salty brined feta cheese, as well as a harder sheep's milk cheese, similar to modern-day pecorino.
I love feta, by the way. One sec. I'm gonna give you a quick recipe. So, just got a big mixing bowl and cut a bunch of tomatoes into like eighths, and then you cut like cucumber up into a bunch of little pieces. Throw that into the bowl. You get feta, throw that into the bowl. Then you get some olive oil and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. You add some basil, some cayenne pepper, a little bit of oregano, a little bit of salt. And did I say salt and pepper? Probably. I'm just trying not to choke. And you just mix that up and you just eat that. You can also add olives if you want. But I know a lot of people are really iffy on olives. I get those like olive mash like spreads with like peppers and stuff in it. I'll throw a bunch of that in there too, and I'll just eat it. Or you can eat it on bread, like bruschetta, or just crackers. Honestly, I just eat it with a fucking spoon. It's so good.
The Iliad, which was written in 762 BC, mentions cheese and coagulating of curds, linking it to healing. The Odyssey does as well, where Homer tells of how Cyclops made cheese, putting curd into a basket so that it could drain. Greeks would use an offering of cheese to the gods, and even a young Spartan's rite of passage was to steal cheese. But when you think of Greece, you obviously think of feta. It is such a popular cheese that it's about 70% of the cheese consumed by Greeks. Today, feta is protected under EU legislation. The cheese known as feta can only be produced in certain regions of Greece. We'll get to more product designations later. Let's go to Rome. And when in ancient Rome, do what both rich and poor Romans do. Eat cheese. The ancient Romans commonly enjoyed it as an appetizer before meals, and even capped it off as a dessert. You would think milk would get the same treatment, but milk tended to be consumed by farmers and in Northern Europe. Romans would consider them low class and called them barbarians. And if you know the ancient Romans, anyone who wasn't Roman was a barbarian.
That does sound
Rome,
good, Hero.
Be catty. Rome produced a variety of soft and hard cheeses, as well as imported cheese from their conquered lands. As the Roman Empire expanded across Europe and the Mediterranean, the logistical problem of feeding the nearly 500,000 Roman soldiers was challenging. But hard cheeses became the go-to meal, ready to eat, of Roman soldiers. Many soldiers also doubled as cheesemakers themselves. A soldier's daily ration would be 1 ounce of pecorino, a hard cheese, or as the Romans would call it, a dry cheese. Pecora translates from Italian as sheep.
Sheep milk
But it would
is so
be
good.
a few centuries later that we would see the emergence of one of Italy's most iconic cow cheeses. This would be around the corner, because as the Roman Empire collapsed and power shifted, manors were gifted from the aristocracy to the church, where around the 7th century we would see the rise of monastic cheeses.
Hast thou not poured me out as milk, and curdled me like cheese? Job, speaking of God.
It may be shocking to hear, but the church, of all places, has been one of food's biggest influencers. Monks have played a pivotal role in developing life's nourishments, such as beer and wine.
There's a, what's it called? A Trappist beer? Which is a kind of beer that's made by monks. I've tried several before. They're actually very good. I really like them. I highly recommend them if you like beer.
Also had a huge hand in creating and preserving the recipes and traditions of cheese. Making cheese was a pretty natural fit since most monasteries were also raising sheep, cows, and goats. Monks also lived a solitary life, so making cheese, something that was very labor-intensive and time-consuming, would totally complement their lifestyle.
Ooh.
We can thank Saint Benedict, the patron saint of Europe and a true saint for cheese. Benedict lived during the late 400s and early 500 AD, and was a religious reformer who was instrumental in the construction of monasteries. These monks, who were devoted to self-sufficiency and manual labor, helped bring a new smelly wrinkle of cheese into the world, the washed rind cheese. In your normal everyday cheese board, washed rind cheeses are synonymous with being, well, smelly, stinky, nasty. A washed rind just means that the fromage, usually a soft cow's milk cheese, has been washed in a brine. The wash makes the surface attract a variety of bacteria, and it is that bacteria that aids in giving most washes a reddish color and a nose-puckering smell. As you can see on this piece of washed rind Langres, those white tufts are the mold Fusarium domesticum, but safe and delicious to eat. Most brines are saltwater, but beer, wine, brandy, and spices can also be used.
Oh man, I'm just having some ribs with rice. That cheese looks really good, and that reminds me a lot of like cured meats, how a lot of them will develop like a mold on the outside, which helps protect it and also develops its flavor a lot more. I really, really love cured meat. I can eat an ungodly amount of cured meat, so I don't buy it very often because that much salt might actually give me a heart attack. And I need a lot of salt. If I don't eat enough salt every day, I get incredibly lethargic and I feel awful. I feel so sick. Like I need salt. I'm dependent on it.
Using beer or wine for a wash also makes quite a bit of sense since many monastic monks were already making both. Cheese, beer, and wine? Yes, please. Monks. The OG BYOB. Most monasteries were in Switzerland, Belgium, and France.
Yeah, I
with
wanna
monks
live there.
experimenting with varieties
So cool.
of milk and processings, they helped create classic stinker legends such as Limburger, Epoisse, and Munster. In fact,
I wanna try Munster.
which gets its name from the Latin word monastratium, which translates
Apparently it's really, really high in K2 and it's supposed to be really good for you.
to monastery, was created around 1371 by Benedictine monks, and not this guy. I know. I was disappointed too. One of the most famous stinky cheeses, sometimes called the king of cheeses, is France's Epoisse. Created at the end of the 16th century by the Cistercian monastery of Epoisse, the recipe stayed with the
really
church
cool.
for over 200 years before being given to farmers in Burgundy. Even everyone's favorite complex, Napoleon, was a fan of this pungent delight. Today,
I wanna try
en
it.
Paris, because Epoisse is so funky, it is illegal to carry it on public transport. C'est stinky. Monasteries didn't just stick to washed rind. Having played a role in developing and perfecting well-known cheeses such as Roquefort, Parmesan, and Tête de Moine, which translates into monk's head. Another saint to be thankful for would be Saint Gall, who in the region of Appenzell helped bring forward Alpine cheeses. As mountain cheeses spread across Switzerland near the French border, Gruyere emerged. Gruyere was so popular, in fact, that the canton of Bern seized control of the Gruyere region. He then moved cheesemakers across the region to settle and grow the cheese business. Alpine
So
cheeses
beautiful
are an
there.
example of transhumance, where cattle, according to the season, are moved around to feed. Typically in the highlands during the summer and the lowlands in the winter, where they feed on grass, straw, and fodder to make the seasonal and oh so delicious Mont d'Or. Around the year 774 AD, the famous Brie, or Brie de Meaux,
Oh, yeah.
was created by monks in the town of Brie.
Oh, I
the
love
cheese
Brie.
became much more popular when Charlemagne stopped by the monastery and tried a hunk. He was so blown away by the creamy Brie that he asked for it to be delivered to his castle on a regular basis.
Yeah,
Charlemagne
'cause it's
basically invented
good.
DoorDash. In the 14th century, in Italy's upper Po River Valley, is where Parmesan, at least the version we know and love
Yes.
today, was developed. Thanks to the intuitiveness of monks in the area, they developed an irrigation system and turned the Po Valley lowlands into a fertile agricultural area for cows to graze. And cow's milk cheese quickly gained popularity. Advancements in cattle breeding and land maintenance helped the Dutch become the original
Kaaskoppen.
or cheeseheads in the Dutch language. That term was not meant to be endearing. The Dutch people were thought to be a joke. People who just sat around and ate cheese all day, which sounds like some pretty
That
rad
sounds
people
awesome.
in my book. But the Dutch weren't just laying around watching windmills spin. They had been making cheese since they were occupied by the Romans around 54 BC, and were actually way ahead of the game. While the Romans taught the Dutch how to make hard cheese, the Dutch took it to a new level. The quest to feed their population required them to offer up something to trade. With their understanding of creating the ideal pasture land, their cattle became better fed, which led to an increase in milk production. Henceforth, the Netherlands became a global trading force in milk. And it would be somewhere around 1184 when the first records of the famous Gouda showed up, or pronounced Gouda if we're trying to be Dutch about it. Being a dry cheese made Gouda's ability to transport to the furthest reaches of the world. Speaking of shelf life, let's jump ahead to the 16th century, when England developed cheddar cheese. Originally named after the town, cheddar is also a verb, cheddaring, which is a unique process in cheesemaking involving slicing strained curd, stacking it, and restacking to draw more whey out. It's a process that makes cheddar a pretty smoothly textured cheese, as well as increases its ability to have a stronger shelf life. England exported the cheddar-making process to the colonies, including Ireland, Canada, Australia, as well as America. U.S. cheesemakers, for the most part, stuck with making exclusively cheddars until about the end of the Civil War. Cheddar is also unique in that it was one of the first cheeses to be mass-produced via industrialization. And it would be a time that would change the course of cheese and cheesemaking forever.
Cheddar is pretty damn good.
You can't make everyone happy. You're not cheese. Anonymous.
When you think of industrialization, you
I'm
might
not
think of
cheese.
England and smokestacks. But this also applied to cheeses and the farm. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the rise of industrialization,
So cool.
along with some key inventions and innovations, would lead to an era of mass production, where it would help expand access to fromage, but artisanal producers would suffer. In America in the 1840s, as railroads developed across the U.S., so did the distance a cheese could cover. To keep up with demand, cooperatives developed and started pooling their milk for the production of cheese. In 1851 in Rome, New York, is where Jesse Williams would build the first cheese factory in the United States. His factory would be a boon to creating large amounts of processed cheese. The independently owned cheesemakers could keep up the volume and efficiency of booming American cheese factories, which were popping up all over the U.S. Wisconsin alone would become home to over 1,500 cheese factories, earning the
whoa.
cheesehead moniker. But as we know now, the Dutch, not Wisconsinites, were the OG cheeseheads. And in 1864, Louis Pasteur developed pasteurization, which is heating milk to kill the bacteria and germs found in raw milk.
Yep.
It would take a little over 70 years, but in 1935, the first industrial cheese using pasteurized milk would be made. Artisanal cheesemakers would argue that pasteurizing milk also kills the good bacteria from the cheese.
Yeah.
In 1918, America would see the rise of one of the world's most curious cheeses, Velveeta. Created by Emile Frey of
I
the
don't like
Monroe
Velveeta.
Cheese Company, Velveeta was a happy accident and was originally intended to melt and reuse leftover cheese, mixing it into a velvety texture. Kraft would buy the company 10 years later and tweak the formula.
Kraft's nutritious Velveeta is full of health from milk.
In 1954, given refrigeration and the rise of the grocery store, the birth of the milk tank was almost the nail in the coffin for artisanal cheese. Industrialization also had another consequence. It took work away from women. In the traditional cheesemaking world, women were the drivers in production,
I believe
being
that.
both milkers and cheesemakers, and were also the keepers of.
Well, also another thing about women in the workplace is that when it came to, especially during like World War One, when all the men were sent over, a lot of women would take over work for men while they were gone. And then when people came back, I mean, unfortunately there were a lot less men, and also the women wanted to continue to work. So there's also that. Yeah, no, you're fine here. It's all right. I'm not gonna hunt you down and put you on the spike for accidentally leaving the the channel. Just relax. You're fine.
The recipes. Factories were
Although
dominated
maybe
by
I
men,
will.
and the perception of women
None
not
of
being
you can
capable
leave
of
me
working
ever.
there pushed them out of the industry. As factory production increased, so did the number of ingredients, going from the traditional cheese ingredients, milk, salt, rennet, enzymes, to a sample of some modern
That's
cheese.
all you need.
Skim milk, whey,
Oh.
milk protein concentrate, sodium citrate, corn syrup solids, salt, buttermilk, part skim milk, cheese culture, sodium phosphate, milk, lactic acid, sorbic acid, natural and artificial flavor, carrageenans, apocarotinol, beta-carotene, titanium dioxide, autolyzed yeast extract, citric acid, vitamin A palmitate, milk fat, and riboflavin.
You see, this right here, people wonder, like, oh man, why is everybody so unhealthy now? I wonder why. This is why, like, the vast majority of the food I make, like, I'll just get, like, fresh veg, fresh meat, and, like, salt and pepper, and, like, some other, like, spices and herbs and stuff. But I very, very, very rarely actually buy anything that comes in, like a container, I much prefer to make everything from scratch. Like, I'll make even my own sauces, I actually started making, like, my own tomato sauces and everything. Like, I'll buy a bunch of tomatoes and, like, onions and, like, the vinegars and, like, everything that I use to, like, make tomato sauce, and I'll do it just from scratch now. So, like, I even make my own tomato sauce now. I need to get a pressure cooker so that I can preserve stuff. But all of our food these days, with all these crazy preservatives that are made in labs, and, like, obviously I'm not, like, trying to completely fearmonger. Not all of them are super bad for you, but they're not all very good for you either. So honestly, Vida, that is so true. But a lot of it really is just to give it more, like shelf stable. To get food to be more shelf stable, and also filling it with cheaper substitutes, so they can maximize their profits and. Yeah.
As recently as 2016, the delicious Kraft Parmesan cheese contains cellulose, which is a filler made from wood chips to prevent the grated cheese from clumping. Fiber. After industrialization, war was another major factor in the demise of artisanal cheeses. In England, between fluctuating prices, rationing, and cheesemakers being called to duty, farm-made cheese was almost completely wiped out after World Wars I and II. Industrial cheeses were cheaper, easier, and more convenient, but also led to the rise of industrial feedlots, which have an impact on the environment and animals, as animals are confined indoors and not able to be outside in the pasture eating their natural grass diet.
In Canada, though, it's very, 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 very rare to see animals just being kept indoors. Like, I drive all over the place, and there are so many gigantic fields, just absolutely, like, huge fields. And that's, like, where our cows are. That's where our sheep are. That's where our goats are. That's, like, the only animals I think that are truly, like, kind of kept indoors here, I think, are chickens. I think chickens have it kind of rough here in Canada. But when it comes to, like, cows and sheep and goats and several other forms of livestock, they're typically kept outside, and they'll have, like, lean-tos and stuff that they can go to. I can't speak for the United States, but here in Canada, our cows are very, very, very well taken care of. At least I can mention that.
With industrialization, not only did quality and taste lose out, sometimes the animals themselves did. For example, take the cheese La Oveja Negra. This queso comes from a black-haired version of the Manchega sheep breed, which are usually white. The black sheep really live up to the black sheep label, and was on the verge of extinction, largely due to the animal producing less milk than its white counterpart. Now it all looks pretty bleak for the small batch, mom and pop, cheese home team. But who was going to save real cheese?
People will buy artisan cheese. Yeah.
You have to be a romantic to invest yourself, your money, and your time in cheese.
Yeah. Oh,
Anthony
100%.
Bourdain.
Yep.
In the United
right.
States, one group you can thank for the return of artisanal cheeses were the hippies. Yeah, that's right.
And
Those
these
dirty,
days,
peace-loving
food reviewer
counterculture
YouTubers.
flower children during the 1960s helped lead the resurgence of farmhouse cheesemaking. Aided
Yeah.
by the rise in gastronomy in the 70s, American artisanal cheeses continued to grow throughout the 80s and 90s. And it was in the early 2000s where, much like artisanal beer, whiskey, and wine, artisanal cheese producers proliferated. In 2012, over 800 small batch cheesemakers produced more than 300 different artisan cheeses, more
Nice.
than doubling the previous 6 years.
Yeah.
Today, the USDA reported that processed cheese consumption has declined by
Good.
4%. The rise
'em.
of artisan cheeses benefited the previously mentioned black Manchega sheep.
I spend so much time walking through the artisan cheese section. I swear to God, like, every single time I go to the grocery store, I always pick up a little piece of weird cheese. You know what I should do? I should do a cheese review video. I should go and pick up a bunch of small things of weird cheeses, and I should do a review video of them. We could do it here on stream. That would be stellar. I would totally do that. Oh, I could do that with cured meat too. Man. Yes, eat the cheese. Eat the cheese, Ark.
Who may produce less milk, but milk they do produce is
Oh.
creamier and tastier, and has since seen a resurgence. Outside of Spain, cheese folks stayed busy in other parts of Europe by developing a system to protect both the cheese and the region where the fromage originated, by providing a standard for intellectual property, especially given many of the cheese's overall long history. The AOC, or Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, was first developed for wines in 1919, and cheese soon gained protection under AOC with Blue Sheep's milk cheese, Roquefort, first earning that distinction in 1925.
Wasn't that the name of the mouse in the Aristocats? Roquefort? Roquefort, however you pronounce that word. I'm pretty sure that was the name of the mouse in the Aristocats.
Appropriate given its history, which in 1393, Charles VI essentially implemented an early version of AOC when he granted a monopoly for the village of Roquefort-sur-Sauzon in the Aveyron region in southern France. Every king thereafter renewed this grant, which helped conceptualize the AOC designation. AOC is a sort of quality assurance that covers all aspects of the process, from both the geography, terroir, the climate, recipe, even the specific input from a person. Terroir was mentioned on that list, and it's a word you hear a lot in the food world. It's how each region's environment helps shape the character and the quality of the cheese produced. The AOC designation protected cheesemakers from getting
Such a
ripped
cool
off,
device.
even our stinky friend, Époisse. This cheese had pretty much disappeared from French farms in the mid-1950s.
It looks like a brain.
Farmers helped resurrect this stinker with the regional knowledge from the locals for the recipe. The cheese gained popularity and earned AOC status in 1991. Charles de Gaulle once said,
Vous gouvernez un pays qui a une quantité de 240
How do you govern a
fromages.
country with
De Gaulle may
246
have actually
cheeses?
underestimated that count. Today in France alone, there are between 1,000 and 1,600 different types of
Oh,
cheese.
I
with
wanna
around
eat 'em
40
all.
varieties that have received AOC
Figs, too?
designations. While France has the AOC designation, many other countries, including Italy and Switzerland, use other acronyms, such as DOC or Denominazione di Origine Controllata, to indicate when a cheese has this designation. In America, because of separate trade laws, we can make it sell Parmesan, call it Parmesan, but it's not a true Parmesan. To get a real, authentic Parmigiano, look for Parmigiano Reggiano.
Yeah,
This regional version
that's
is
the good
compliant with
stuff.
cattle diet, length to age of the cheese, and geographic production area, meaning that to keep its authenticity, cheese has to come from Parma and Reggio Emilia provinces of Italy.
Oh.
While Europe has protected many regional cheeses, some well-known names like cheddar and Gouda are used more generically, and in this way say less about where the cheese is from, and more a way to describe the product of style itself. While many aspects of cheese have changed over thousands of years, many have stayed the same. Throughout its history, we've seen cheese go through a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And seeing how cheese is made, it seems appropriate. Given the impact on our environment, our changing landscape, where will cheese be in the next 50 years? But as long as good and real cheese is here, might as well enjoy a piece, a slice, or a hunk. And remember to support your local regional cheesemakers.
Oh my goodness.
So what do you think? What other foods would you like a full history on? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other food videos from our weird history.
Oh man, cheese! I friggin' love cheese. Oh god, I love it so much. Alright, everybody. You know what to do. Go and give that video a like, because that was good. But, for real though, cheese... A follow-up cheese video... Copy link. Alright, a follow-up cheese video. Let's see then. Ban you later.
Hi, I'm Chef Mike Nyland. I'm a Tucson personal chef, and I'm here to show you how to make a 3-cheese blend for pizza. First you start with shredded mozzarella, then a shredded provolone, and then a freshly grated Parmesan. You mix them all together in the bowl. And then you can use it for your favorite pizza. That's how you make a 3-cheese blend for your pizza.
I've learned so much.